Discover how a new secretary's incredible song revealed a hidden smile in a CEO after 20 years. Lucy stared at the endless spreadsheets flickering on her computer screen, her fingers a mix of anxiety and impatience against the keys. The bustling marketing firm dyeing the Manhattan skyline gray suffocated her creativity. She shouldn't be here, not for the bills, not for her spirited teenage son Jamie, who needed a mother walking tall, not one drowning in deadlines. At 34, she wrestled with her dreams buried beneath piles of paperwork and the weight of expectations. Music flooded her mind, a vibrant lifeline, yet drowned in layers of self-doubt and corporate rigidity. Every hum she caught herself crafting during lunch was a sharp reminder of lost opportunities. When had she relinquished her melodies for the corporate grind? Juggling the demands of her job with the wild energy of Jamie was a precarious balancing act. She loved him deeply, but doubts clawed at her. Was she strong enough to make both work? Adding a burgeoning interest in her aloof CEO, Mark, made her head spin. The man, cemented in success, had built walls that Lucy thought impenetrable. The air of authority around him wasn't just intimidating, he conveyed a disquieting nostalgia she couldn't shake. And then, on a chilly December afternoon, fate intervened. She stumbled into the break room and found him there, solitary and brooding. Wisdom flashed through her. Instead of retreating as usual, she let the few notes of her original song slip through her lips. The melody swayed through the tense atmosphere, barely above a whisper, resonating with themes of resilience. A flicker of surprise lit up Mark's expression before retreating into his perfectly polished facade. It was as if she had unearthed something deep within him, the simple joy of a smile, one that had evaded him for decades. Before she could grasp the significance, she was sent spiraling into uncertainty. Mark was married, ever the barrier to her untested heart. She wanted to share her voice, but glances from judgmental colleagues crowded her thoughts like an insistent swarm. The office holiday party loomed, a cacophony of forced cheer and plastic smiles. What could she possibly contribute beyond the secretary role thrust upon her? Here, commitments tugged at her like heavy weights. Facing Mark on that stage felt both liberating and terrifying. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. With the party in full swing, a storm brewed within her. Spotting Mark across the room ignited her nerves, feeding her desire to sing with the passion that coursed through her once. As she took a shaky step in front of the crowd, a hunger for connection clawed at her heart. The stakes felt insurmountable, and the thought of housing ambitions for the sake of professionalism was suffocating. Why did everything feel so complicated? As she began to sing, pouring years of heartache and hope into every note, the world melted away. The melody spoke of battles fought in silence, igniting warmth in Mark's cold gaze, but it threatened the precariously balanced web of her life. And as Mark listened, internal conflict etched on his face, hope and despair battled within her. Was she willing to risk it all for one fleeting moment of connection? With each passing line, was she unlocking a world beyond both their burdens, or merely declaring war on her own future? The echoes of earnest melodies drifted into the filled air, as they both hovered on the precipice of something unseen, feeling the weight of unfulfilled yearnings and unquenchable fears. The notes of her song still hung in the air, like ephemeral traces of hope. Each word escaped Lucy's lips, infused with the rawness of her truth. Yet it was Mark's gaze that captivated her, the way it flickered between recognition and vulnerability. In that instant, the chaos of the party faded. Expressions of amusement and distraction transformed into an unbreakable silence as they locked eyes. And something shifted within her. Self-doubt, that persistent shadow, clung to her as she completed the final verse. What followed was an electric silence, charged with the energy of unsaid words and unfulfilled expectations. The crowd erupted into applause, yet Lucy barely processed it. She had climbed out of her role as a secretary, stepping onto a stage carved from the fragments of her ambitions. But what did it mean? Even as the applause faded, its echoes reverberated through her like the aftershocks of an earthquake. The newfound attention brought clarity and confusion in equal measure. The admiration from colleagues almost felt foreign. Was she being recognized for her professionalism or her music? Her heart raced with the fear of being labeled the singer instead of the capable secretary she had worked so hard to become. Across the room, Mark approached her, his serious demeanor softened by a glimmer of warmth that was impossible to ignore. "You have a gift, Lucy," he said, his voice a low murmur that matched the intimacy of the moment. Her pulse quickened, conflicted between gratitude and uncertainty. What did he really see in her? Did he see a potential partner in crime, or merely a fleeting spark to beautify his dreary existence? "Thank you," she replied, hesitating. Words swirled in her mind, tugging at her resolve. Should she mention her aspirations? Should she tell him how his presence stirred something in her too, rendering her ambitions more vibrant? For too long she had shelved her music. Was this performance just a beautiful distraction, or a pathway to rediscovering herself? "Will you share more of your music?" he asked, making her take a breath filled with uncertainty. It was a question folded in layers of interpretation. Did he truly want to hear it, or was he looking to distract himself from his own tumultuous life? She started, only to falter, realizing this could be a potential invitation to delve deeper or an easy way to spiral back into doubt. In Mark's presence, her motives collided fiercely. "I'm not sure," she finished, the words heavy with regret. Did she want to go back to just being the secretary? To curtail her burgeoning identity and cozy up to the familiar lines of unfulfilled yearning? As she looked away, an internal battle raged on. Perhaps her worries were unfounded. Perhaps Mark, despite his marital status, may actually appreciate her as an artist, a creator, not just an employee. But the very thought hung heavily in the atmosphere between them, a fine line she was terrified to cross. Also unspoken was the tension in the office. The whispers, the apprehensions about her professional reputation swirled in her thoughts, bringing a sense of isolation within a crowd. Could she risk her already tenuous position in exchange for a burgeoning connection? The night dragged on, filled with conversations that felt increasingly like burdens. Each query from her colleagues only furthered her self-doubt, with veiled comments hidden behind polite smiles. Yet one thing lingered, Mark's hungry gaze and the promise of something deeper. What did it mean to her to act on this knowledge? In that moment, as laughter and clinking glasses filled the room, she realized something crucial. The choice laid before her wasn't just about Mark. It was about her own liberation, the freedom to be seen, to evolve beyond expectations. As the party continued around her, she felt the pull to step back onto the stage of her own life, reclaim the melodies that had always belonged to her. Yet, as the pangs of uncertainty began to fade, she sensed a different kind of storm brewing within Mark. His smile had revealed a vulnerability, but the shadows lurking in his eyes spoke of a burdened past intertwined with the challenges yet to come. Facing the unknown, she resolutely decided. This was not merely about her own discovery. The moment of truth had arrived, igniting a determination she never knew she carried, pushing her into realms she had once deemed impossible. Would she dare to confront not only her fears, but also the complexities rising between them? As she stood taller, the next step awaited her with bated breath, unsure of where the path would lead. But it was time to face the music, literally and figuratively. And as she stepped away from the reflective shadows of the past, a new chapter beckoned, leaving her on the cusp of deeper revelations. What lay ahead was the frontier of not just her dreams, but the unfolding truth of who she might be willing to become. As the party began to wind down, Lucy found herself wedged between the remnants of her recent performance and the burgeoning tension in her chest. The applause still echoed in her thoughts, but the warmth of recognition faded, replaced by an invasive wave of uncertainty. The questions rushed in like a sudden tide. What now? Could she truly harness this spark ignited by her song, or was this merely a fleeting moment of bravery? Mark lingered nearby, the distance between them charged with unexpressed thoughts. Each lingering glance felt like an unwrapped gift, begging to be explored. Yet she remained tethered to the ground, wrestling with cumbersome doubts that threatened to anchor her back to her old life. The prospect of sharing more of her music hung palpable in the air, its weight almost suffocating. To weave her reality around melodies once considered distant dreams felt daunting. This wasn't simply about being the capable secretary anymore. The stellar performance had shifted the genesis of her identity, expanding it into uncharted territories. She caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the window, observing the blend of fear and excitement etched onto her face. The vibrant woman who had taken the stage was still there, yet it was clashing with something familiar: conformity. The urge to fit neatly in the defined box of a professional role threatened her desire to break free. What did she want most? Validation from her peers, or the freedom to express who she really was in all its messy, beautiful truth? The sensual music of her earlier performance whispered promises of liberation. But with every heartbeat, the potential fallout of pursuing that very freedom formed a chorus of its own, reminding her of her precarious position. Just when she thought she might retreat into the safety of anonymity, Mark stepped closer, his presence both invigorating and intimidating. "I won't push you, but I hope you consider sharing your music with me again. There's something authentic in your voice that I think could resonate with more people than just this room." His sincerity gleamed in his eyes, but Lucy couldn't ignore the pang of vulnerability beneath his words, making her question if this was merely a platitude or something deeper. Instinctively, she knew she had decisions to make, both personally and professionally. It was essential to approach this juncture with caution, but every moment spent doubting felt like an affront to her dreams. Mark's perceptiveness unnerved her, forcing her to confront not only the colors of her desires, but the shadows of her fears. "Maybe I will," she finally replied, her voice a whisper threaded with uncertainty. Would a mere maybe carry the weight of her ambitions? Would it be enough to transcend her past, or simply tether her more firmly to it? She internally wrestled with the implications of his request and her response. As the last remnants of the party dissolved, Lucy resolved to take the first step towards reclaiming her identity. She realized it wasn't merely about the stage or the music. It involved embracing a core of herself she had buried too long. "Tomorrow, I'll bring my guitar to the office," she thought. An audible gasp echoed within her mind, a daring plan to entwine her two worlds. Sitting at her desk, she would transform the unyielding office into a sanctuary for expression. This would mark the beginning of her journey, a declaration that artistry and professionalism could coexist without sacrificing one for the other. She turned to Mark once more, a season of courage swirling in her heart. "I want to show you what I can do." Every word she spoke felt like a commitment to breaking the shackles that bound her to self-doubt. With the hope of a new dawn rising, Lucy took a step toward Mark, who stood, intent and expectant. Yet another question hung in the atmosphere. What would she uncover about herself in revealing this new facet of her being? As the complexity of their connection deepened, the stakes climbed higher. "I honestly hope you know what you're getting into, Lucy." Mark's voice tugged her back down, carrying a warning masked under layers of encouragement. She was entering an arena far more textured than she could imagine. In the dimming light of the party, This next step, laden with promise and uncertainty, beckoned her closer, her passionate soul yearning to be realized. Would she overcome her fear to embrace this new phase, or would doubt shatter the fragile connection she built with not only her aspirations but with Mark as well? Morning light filtered through the office windows as Lucy prepared for her bold step into a new reality. Her guitar felt heavy, not just in her hands, but in the expectation she placed upon it. She had spent countless hours practicing, pouring herself into the music. Yet the thought of sharing it within the sterile confines of the office felt like teetering on the precipice, heart racing and hesitation clawing at her mind. With each step to her desk, her thoughts turned over like pages in a book, each one filled with doubts and a flicker of hope. Was she really ready to bridge the gulf between her day job and her hidden passion? As she settled down, she could hear the mundane sounds of office life bustling around her. The rhythmic clattering of keyboards, the hum of conversation, the rustle of paperwork. But inside her, the chorus of her performance still played on. It was a battle between the noise of doubt and the melody of her aspirations. She positioned her guitar carefully, fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the tuning. Today was not just about music. It was about confronting herself. Lucy took a deep breath, allowing the air to fill her lungs before exhaling slowly, attempting to exhale the apprehension that clung like a hollowness in her chest. Suddenly, the office door opened, and Mark strode in, his presence lighting up the room in a way that made her heart race. He was ready to maintain his role as a guide in her journey, or perhaps challenge her further. "You came through," he said, a mixture of excitement and curiosity flooding his voice. She wondered if he felt the same tremor of apprehension that she did. "I figured it was time to show my other side," Lucy replied, her voice surprising herself with its firmness. It was a resolve she hadn't fully expected, and yet it felt right in that moment. Mark moved a step closer, the air around them charged with anticipation. "And what do you think your other side looks like?" His question hung between them, almost playful, but there was seriousness beneath it, urging her to explore. "It's messy and real," she began, her mind racing as thoughts collided with each other. "It's all the things I've hidden away, and now it feels like they want to break free." Lucy swallowed hard. Sharing that vulnerability left her exposed, a truth that was both terrifying and liberating. With a steadying cadence, she strummed a few notes. The sound resonated through the small space, drawing attention. A few colleagues walked by, brows furrowed with curiosity, glancing in her direction. Their gazes felt like a spotlight, ranging from skepticism to genuine intrigue. Would they honor her authenticity, or would they mock the very attempt to diverge from her role as simply the secretary? But the more she played, the more she realized that this moment was not solely about their perceptions, it was her journey. She resumed playing, pouring each ounce of her emotions into the melody, transforming the office's sterile atmosphere into a canvas of vibrant sound. It was both exhilarating and suffocating, but she pressed on, determined to defy the constraints that had long burdened her spirit. As she finished, a sudden silence engulfed the room. Moments later, applause broke through, echoing from the small crowd that had gathered. It caught her off guard. Their appreciation, however muted, lifted a weight that had been pressing on her for too long. Mark stepped forward, admiration shining in his eyes. "See? That was amazing! You touched something real in everyone here," he encouraged, and his words flooded Lucy with warmth, igniting a spark deep within her. "Thank you," she replied, losing herself in the moment. Though she sensed acceptance from her colleagues, an undercurrent of fear twisted in her gut, pricking at the edges of her confidence. What next? Would sharing this part of herself change how they viewed her? Would they still see her as capable, or merely as the artist? For now, the applause didn't matter. She had stepped into the light, unveiled a fragment of her essence, and embraced the unknown. But the lingering query nudged at her consciousness. Would she navigate the path ahead with authenticity, or fall back into the comfort of conformity? As she took a seat, the clamor of questions continued, but a new determination anchored her in the present. The real performance lay ahead, intertwined with unexpected challenges. Mark stood beside her, an unspoken promise of support. Yet Lucy knew she had to confront the growing tension alone. At what point would she claim her identity fully? This revelation filled her with both dread and excitement. The initial plunge was merely the beginning. The true test awaited her, subscription to a narrative that could unfold in countless ways. But ultimately, it was hers to shape. The stage was set for a confrontation with the parts of herself still shrouded in fear. And just like that, her mind started racing ahead. What if she pushed the boundaries even further? What if she shared not just her music, but the stories behind it? As Lucy returned to her desk, the weight of her performance hung in the atmosphere, mingling with unresolved questions about her journey. The applause reverberated in her ears, invigorating her spirit, while simultaneously plunging her deeper into an ocean of self-doubt. What had she really unleashed? Had she merely scratched the surface of the potential that resided within her? Or had she opened a Pandora's box that would expose every insecurity she had carefully tucked away? She absent-mindedly scrolled through emails, but the words blurred, and the monotonous hum of office life faded into white noise. Mark's presence lingered beside her, a tangible warmth that reminded her she wasn't as alone in this exploration as she once believed. He had seen her, truly seen her. But now she had to confront the critical question. Could she maintain this authenticity without losing the sense of control she had relied on for so long? Days passed, and the initial thrill of her performance lost its edge, leaving behind the stark reality of her usual routine. Each morning she built up the courage to bring up her guitar, but hesitated, grappling with another layer of complexity, the stories behind her music. She had danced with vulnerability once, and now she wondered if she had the courage to dig deeper and share the fragments of her life that had inspired her lyrics. That night, as she sat in her dimly lit apartment, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and the soft glow of fairy lights, she picked up her guitar again. But this time, her fingers played something raw and personal, melodies woven with whispers of heartbreak, dreams stunted by fear, and the bittersweet nostalgia of lost opportunities. As she strummed the strings, images of her childhood ambitions flickered through her mind, illuminating paths not taken and moments of fierce determination, now buried beneath mundane responsibilities. But this was only a practice for an impending leap. Lucy knew she was ready to articulate her stories, the moments she had shied away from exposing. Her heart raced with the thought of unveiling such intimate truths to her colleagues. Would they resonate with her experiences? Would her vulnerability transform her in their eyes from simply the secretary to something more? A storyteller, an artist, perhaps? Even an equal? On another day, the buzz in the office shifted uncomfortably as Mark approached her desk with an unexpected intensity. "I've been thinking, Lucy, your gift could mean so much more than just an occasional performance. What if you hosted a lunchtime session to share not just your music, but the stories across all of our lives? It could foster vulnerability and connection in this place." The wave of fear crashed swiftly. Lucy's fingers fumbled with her guitar pick, her thoughts racing. Her internal monologue was chaotic. The potential was exhilarating, yet terrifying. What if sharing these stories brought about judgment instead of camaraderie? She was poised at the edge of a much more significant abyss than she'd anticipated, one that threatened to expose her innermost fears in a profound way. "I don't know," she finally replied, fumbling for words. What might she uncover about herself if she took on this challenge? Was she brave enough to step into the limelight again, bearing her soul in such a personal way? Mark studied her intently, a glimmer of encouragement shining through. "Lucy, these stories can inspire. You can create a ripple effect, encouraging others to share what they've kept hidden. You're bridging connections in ways this office hasn't seen before." She stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. This was a moment of decision, a crossroads in her journey. Would she risk her comfort zone for true connection? As uncertainty washed over her, she realized this was the paradox of growth. Moments of vulnerability were also gateways to strength. Could embracing the narratives of her life forge not just her own path, but ignite courage in others? Feeling the gravity of her potential, Lucy took a deep breath, imagining the power of that shared experience. She could feel the stirrings of determination within her, the burgeoning realization that to truly define herself, she needed to step into the narrative she had kept hidden. What began as an uncertain venture was now morphing into something far grander, an invitation to explore her identity in public for the first time. As days unfolded with increasing anticipation, a new question loomed. How far was she willing to take this journey of vulnerability? With the office humming around her, Lucy felt the challenge ahead morph into an opportunity. She stood on the brink of discovery, and the moment she would face not only her colleagues, but also the parts of herself she had yet to embrace was closer than ever. Time will reveal, she thought, firming her resolve. But a chilling realization struck. Was she prepared for the truth that would inevitably surface? As Lucy paced her small apartment, guitar in hand, the dim light flickered, casting shadows that danced upon the walls, mirroring her turmoil. The prospect of sharing her stories, her vulnerabilities, loomed over her, a cloud tinged with both hope and dread. She had spent years constructing an image as someone invulnerable, someone in control, but now that fortress felt increasingly fragile. Just a 30-minute session, she muttered to herself, trying to dilute the enormity of Mark's suggestion. How hard can it be? Yet her heart raced at the thought. Would her colleagues truly want to listen? Would they even care? The little voice in her head, so accustomed to shackling her, whispered doubts that echoed with relentless intensity. With purpose, she began to write down her ideas. Each line she penned was a step further out of the shadows. Memories surged through her like a tide. The moment she had stood in front of her childhood class to perform for the first time, the sting of rejection from peers, and the painful silences that ensued. These memories, typically dismissed, now breathed life into her words. She questioned everything. Did they hold relevance today? Were these moments merely old scars, or were they the foundations of her artistry? Days melted into nights as she wrestled with her thoughts. The familiarity of her desk at work transformed into a battleground where ambition clashed with terror. Whenever Mark caught her gaze, she said nothing, but the weight on her shoulders felt heavier. She could sense his trust in her growing, yet a part of her yearned to hide behind the facade of unassailable competence, worn but safe. One gray afternoon, a pivotal opportunity emerged. The office had organized an informal gathering, and team leaders were encouraged to share experiences. In that moment, Lucy took a leap of faith, fueled by a swell of determination and a flicker of fear. She would go ahead with the lunchtime session after all, not just for herself, but for those around her who might be battling their own clouds of doubt. Sharing may just be what we need, she thought, mentally preparing her presentation. But the moment she stepped in front of her colleagues, gripping the microphone tightly, a rush of vulnerability swept over her. The room pulsated with hushed chatter, eyes focused on her with varying degrees of anticipation and skepticism. What am I even doing here? She thought. The familiar flood of self-doubt surged back. Yet, as she strummed the first chords on her guitar, the music flowed like a balm. The notes wrapped around her as she sang, interspersing personal anecdotes that revealed her deepest fears, joys, and failures. She laid bare a story about missing opportunities, about fear paralyzing her ambitions, but also about the undying ember of passion that encouraged her fight for authenticity. As her voice wavered between confidence and trepidation, she noticed something extraordinary. Faces, once blank or distracted, began to transform. Eyes lit up, smiles emerged like blooms in spring, unexpected and beautiful. In that moment, she realized she was not alone. They were resonating with her words, feeling the rawness in her stories, and starting to reflect on their own. The invisible barriers began to dissolve, revealing a tapestry of shared struggles. Suddenly, amidst the sea of supportive faces, Lucy spotted Mark, nodding encouragingly, his expression unguarded, and it hit her then, the power of collective vulnerability. Not only was she forging a connection with her colleagues, but she was also dismantling her own inhibitions, carving out a new identity in the process. But as the final note hung in the air, the applause thundered louder than ever, echoing in her heart, reminding her that the journey had only just begun. What lay ahead? The thrill of this unveiling felt exhilarating, yet also daunting. She had unlocked something monumental, not just for herself, but a potent truth waiting to be explored within her office culture. Pulsating with new questions, she contemplated, who else among them carried untold stories, and could she lead them towards revealing their truths, just as she had confronted her own? With renewed determination, she stepped off the improvised stage, pondering the rippling effects of her courage. The moment for quiet reflection passed. Now this was about action and connection. And among the echoes of song and stories, a new question emerged within her. How would she utilize this newfound power to inspire change, not just within herself, but within every heart willing to listen? Lucy stepped away from the microphone, her heart still pounding with an aftershock of adrenaline and exhilaration. The applause was a radiant affirmation, washing over her like sunlight breaking through clouds. Yet, amidst that warmth, a simmering anxiety began to bubble up. What if her moment in the spotlight was fleeting? What if the connection made in those few minutes couldn't translate into lasting change? Back at her desk, thoughts cascaded through her mind. She read through a few emails, but their contents felt irrelevant, distant from the vitality she had felt moments earlier. Each click of the keyboard felt like a drumbeat against her newfound resolve. Determination coursed through her as she realized that her story was not just a singular narrative. It could be a catalyst for something greater. Mark had approached her after the session, his eyes shimmering with pride. "You've got a gift, Lucy. There's something powerful about how you connected with everyone. Let's explore that." His words ignited a flicker of ambition within her. Was it possible that she could be more than just a cog in the machine? Could she pave a path for others, leading them to express their own truths? Ideas began to swirl within her. Hosting another session, perhaps a regular series, could anchor her newfound momentum. It wouldn't just be about her anymore. It would be a platform to cultivate vulnerability and authenticity across the workplace. But with that came the weight of responsibility. Would her colleagues trust her with their stories? Determined, Lucy set aside time each evening to sketch out a vision. She filled pages with potential themes: unpacking fear, rediscovering joy, the power of storytelling. Each title felt like a step down a path towards a communal discovery, an opportunity for transformation, both personal and collective. Yet, with every sketch, she wrestled with her inner critic, who screamed that these were naive fantasies. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling with both excitement and trepidation. That self-doubt clung like shadow, but somehow Lucy found herself embracing it. She remembered the faces in the audience, how they had transformed with her each note, each revelation. If they could resonate with her, perhaps they could also find strength in their embedded truths. The next morning, she reached out to colleagues who had offered her their phone numbers after the session, hopeful connections teeming with potential stories. A flurry of replies flooded in, a rising tide of willingness, intrigue, and in some cases, hidden apprehension. "You would be surprised at how many of us have been touched by fear or regret," one message read. A wave of exhilaration swept over her as she recognized her ability to facilitate dialogue that had previously felt impossible. She began to respond and plan informal coffee chats, giving herself permission to learn. Each conversation transformed a stranger into a companion through shared struggles and laughter, slowly shaping a community of openness. Yet, even as these discussions unfolded, a faint anxiety lingered in her mind. How would the leadership respond to this unraveling of vulnerability? They had never prioritized emotional connection in the office. It was always about precision, productivity, and results. The thought of the CEO, still an imposing figure after her brief but impactful encounter, interrupting her well-meaning initiative made her heart race. A new tension brewed within her. She had embarked on this journey of authenticity, but it now felt like a door leading into uncharted territory. How would she present her ideas to the upper management, particularly to someone like the CEO who embodied corporate stoicism? Lucy was determined not to stop here. It was time to meet that challenge head-on. She cracked her knuckles and took a deep breath, clearing her mind of doubt. The sun streamed through her office window, illuminating her determination. They had entrusted her with their stories. It was time to consider how to share this movement with those who held the reins of authority. As Lucy penned her proposal to present to management, a new realization dawned. The very bond she had formed with her colleagues could be the key to swinging open that door. Wouldn't it be powerful to show the leadership just how much this personal initiative mattered to the team's dynamic? As she prepared the proposal, each word offered a glimpse of courage, but lingering questions kept her heart aflame. How would she confront the risks that accompanied her passion? Was she prepared for the ramifications if the leadership resisted? The moment was approaching, bringing with it the scent of possibility, both inviting and intimidating. She felt herself standing on the brink of a leap, ready to transform vulnerability into strength, but the stakes felt higher than ever before. What awaited her on the other side? Lucy stared at her screen, the blinking cursor a persistent reminder of her goal. One thought danced in her mind: clarity. She had to translate the palpable emotions shared in her recent conversations into a compelling narrative for management. She began typing with shaky fingers, crafting an introduction that would resonate with the executive team. Over the past few weeks, I have engaged in conversations with colleagues that revealed the transformative power of sharing our stories and vulnerabilities. The sentence felt powerful, but carrying it through to completion proved more complicated than anticipated. She paused, reflecting briefly on the apprehension that threatened to creep in. Every word bore the heavy weight of expectation. Her resolve teetered. Her phone buzzed to life, distracting her momentarily. A message from Mark flashed on the screen. "Just checking in. How's the proposal coming along? Remember, be bold." Those two words struck her with intensity, echoing in her mind. She mustered enough energy to continue writing, allowing herself to weave in anecdotes shared during the informal chats. One colleague had recounted a time they had felt paralyzed by fear during a pivotal project. Lucy could feel the authenticity in those words. She wished to communicate that pain, the stark disconnect that lay at the heart of corporate culture. Yet, as the clock on the wall ticked toward the deadline for submission, Lucy's confidence began to dwindle. The prospect of an uphill battle loomed larger than any prior triumph. Fear and doubt contorted in her mind. What if the leadership dismissed her? What if they saw her ideas as a distraction? With determination, she pushed through that mental fog, allowing every nagging insecurity to fuel her persistence instead. It was essential that she framed this as more than just an initiative. She needed to evoke an image of the organization as a living body where every part contributed to the whole. Eventually, she crafted a compelling conclusion that included her vision of a team-building workshop. Reflected in it was the idea of connection as a pathway to enhance performance, as morale could not merely be bolstered through spreadsheets and revenue targets. Feeling a surge of energy, she typed out her final sentence. "Let us embrace vulnerability as strength and foster an environment where every voice matters." Completing the proposal invigorated her. A flicker of hope sparked anew. But as she hovered over the send button, a deep tremor of hesitation swept through her. Would they understand? Taking a deep breath, she pressed send. The deed was done, and she leaned back in her chair, adrenaline coursing through her. The next few hours felt like a roller coaster of anxiety, waiting for any response. As dusk turned to evening, the clock ticked slowly, taunting her with uncertainty. Her colleagues had shown enthusiasm for her concept. This venture had already begun shifting the office's energy. Yet, their support made Lucy acutely aware that, for the first time, she had become something more than just a bystander in her own life. The phone rang, pulling her from her reverie. It was Mark. His tone was light but charged. "I heard about your proposal. I think you'll be pleased with the feedback." Heart racing, she responded. "What did they say?" "You might want to prepare for a different kind of meeting. They want to hear your vision live, not just on paper." Her breath caught for a moment. A live presentation? A flood of new dread washed over her, but within that dread lay a spark of exhilaration. This was the moment she craved, even if she hadn't anticipated it. All her doubts and uncertainties would be put to the test. How could she convey the passion and purpose that ignited her desire to cultivate an authentic culture? Would she rise to the occasion or crumble under scrutiny? "Okay," she said, fighting to keep her composure. "I'll prepare." As she hung up, a mixture of anxiety and excitement overwhelmed her. This was no longer just an exercise in speaking. It was a challenge that would coax out every hidden competency she had shied away from before. She grabbed a notebook and began drafting her speaking points, feeling the thrill of an impending confrontation. The time had come to face the leaders who held the keys to her vision. Would she have the courage to unveil her heart, or would she retreat to safety? This was no ordinary pitch. It felt monumentally transformative, both for her and for the landscape of the workplace. With her heart pounding, Lucy prepared for the confrontation that would shape her future. But what she didn't know was what would be revealed in that room, the ties that bonded them all, and the surprises lurking within even the most stoic of mentors. Lucy stared at the blank page of her notebook. The ink of her pen momentarily paused as thoughts raced in her mind. The proposal had been sent, but the reality of what lay ahead weighed heavily upon her. This presentation was not merely an opportunity. It was a pivotal moment that could redefine not only her career, but also reshape the dynamics of her workplace. She felt stuck between the exhilaration of her hard work being recognized and the suffocating fear of how it might be received. A vulnerability invaded her thoughts, whispering that she might falter in front of the executives. The faces of her peers swirled in her memory, their encouragement conflicting with her own self-doubt. Determined to command her fear, Lucy decided to channel those emotions into her preparation. She opened a fresh document on her computer, the cursor blinking, urging her to articulate her message. With every bullet point she penned, she focused on clarity of message rather than the weight of potential judgment. She needed to remember her underlying goal, fostering genuine connections and transforming the corporate environment. As she sketched out the framework of her presentation, she realized her strength lay not just in sharing data, but in fostering an emotional narrative. She would emphasize how their stories could shift the culture from one of fear to one of collaboration. A team-building workshop could be the catalyst for this transformation, but she had to illustrate its necessity with authenticity. Her thoughts drifted back to her conversations with colleagues, their candid contributions emerging like vivid snapshots. One story in particular struck her, the tale of a colleague's struggle to speak openly during a major meeting, a moment that had resonated deeply with many. Through this memory, Lucy acknowledged her own past reluctance to voice her opinions. Why has she allowed hesitation to silence her potential? With this realization, she restructured her approach. She would not focus solely on the workshop, but also on her own narrative, the journey toward embracing her voice and encouraging others to do the same. Perhaps by sharing her story, she would demystify the vulnerability, showing that it was a vital key to unlocking collective strength. As the hours passed, the weight of expectation began to shift into something lighter. Each point she organized reflected her truth. The flutter in her stomach transformed from anxiety to adrenaline. She was preparing to reveal not just her professional aspirations, but also personal fortitude. There was no faking her emotions this time, Authenticity was her most potent ally. When the day of the presentation arrived, Lucy dressed carefully, donning her favorite blazer, a touchstone of the confident woman she aspired to be. Standing in front of the mirror, she took a moment to inhale deeply and recite affirmations that quelled her nerves. She reminded herself that this was not a test of perfection, but an invitation to share her heart. As she approached the conference room, she felt the energy shift around her. The room was filled with eager faces. Some she recognized as mentors, while others were strangers in positions of authority. Every step felt significant as she crossed into the space where her growth would be tested. Lucy took a breath, the initial coldness of uncertainty replaced by the warmth of resolve, as she called upon the insights gathered in her preparations. She began her presentation, words flowing with newfound clarity, a rhythm building as she shared the stories that connected them all. But midway through her pitch, just as she was about to delve into her vision of the workshop, she noticed the CEO's expression. He appeared engaged, nodding along, but there was something deeper lurking behind his stoic facade. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, or a hint of vulnerability she had not anticipated. In that instant, Lucy understood that this moment was not just about her professional breakthrough. It was about creating a platform for others to reveal their truths as well. As she continued, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a simple meeting. It was the beginning of something transformative. Her moment of insight arrived with a calm clarity. All the stories shared were connected beyond her own perception, and she was about to discover what lay beneath the icy corporate barriers. Just as her narrative reached its climax, an unexpected shift in the room occurred, leaving her. What hidden stories or vulnerabilities were waiting to be unveiled? As Lucy concluded her presentation, a palpable buzz electrified the room, resonating off the walls with anticipation. It had always been her fear that vulnerability would be met with skepticism, but instead, she witnessed an unprecedented wave of engagement. Colleagues leaned in, nodding, and even the CEO, a figure she had always perceived as unreachable, showed a glimmer of interest that ignited a flicker of hope within her. "Thank you, Lucy," he began, his voice steady but warm. "I think we've all felt the weight of our own stories. It's been too easy in the corporate arena to put up walls, dismissing the value of emotional connection in favor of productivity." Her heart raced at his words. This was not just the validation she sought, it was recognition of a shared need for authenticity within the workplace. Something shifted within her. These stories were not just hers alone, but echoed in everyone's experience in the room. Around the table, perspectives emerged. One manager shared how he once feared speaking in team settings, echoing Lucy's own journey. Another recounted how personal challenges had affected their professional drive, creating moments of raw honesty that rippled through the group. Each voice was a building block, gradually constructing a safe space that had started with Lucy's courage. "Perhaps it's time we create a culture that honors these stories," Lucy suggested, emboldened by the unfolding conversation. The prospect of implementing a regular program began to take shape, the narrative of vulnerability transforming into an actionable vision. Mark stepped in, reflecting the sentiment. "What if we establish a monthly session where team members can share their experiences? Our leadership supports you wholeheartedly, Lucy, especially if it means fostering a more cohesive team dynamic." Lucy felt a surge of accomplishment. Not only had she conquered her fears of speaking and executing a successful presentation, but she had also kindled a commitment within her colleagues to embrace vulnerability. Daily, her life had revolved around operating as just the secretary, but now she stood recognized as a contributor to the culture, a creative force steering new initiatives. The discussion continued, and a dialogue about resources, schedules, and themes unfolded, thickening the air with excitement. Each suggestion shared built momentum, crafting not only a plan, but a movement towards authenticity in a previously rigid environment. As the meeting concluded and colleagues began to disperse, Lucy caught the CEO's approving nod, an almost imperceptible smile breaking through his professional demeanor. It struck her that perhaps the shared narratives, once hidden behind stoic facades, connected them beyond titles and roles. He was not merely her superior, he was a fellow human wrestling with complex experiences. Returning to her desk, Lucy felt lighter, igniting further reflection on her self-discovery. Each word she had spoken, each story shared, echoed throughout the workplace, marking an indelible transformation in her identity. No longer just the capable secretary, she stepped firmly into the role of a leader driving positive change. The echoes of her performance lingered long after the meeting, intertwining with the music that had once seemed so distant. She felt pride coursing through her, an enriching, justified sense of accomplishment reinforced by the connections that had been cultivated. Her life had expanded in ways she hadn't deemed possible. Her son, Jamie, would see a changed mother, one that pursued dreams relentlessly, a role model. As the sun dipped below the Manhattan skyline, Lucy realized she had not just challenged herself. She had proven that authenticity could kindle change, not just on an individual level, but across the entire organization. In that moment of clarity, she vowed to continually foster this new foundation, not just as a fleeting initiative, but as a lasting commitment to a culture of openness. This wasn't merely about her. It was about forging connections that humanized and united diverse narratives within the workplace. Lucy smiled, her heart solidly anchored in newfound confidence. She had taken charge of her narrative and gently opened doors for others to step through as well. She felt alive, embracing her identity as both an artist and a professional. As she locked her computer for the day, she knew it was time to share this story beyond the walls of her office. It would inspire a cascade of dialogues that could change lives. Determined, she resolved to document her journey, sharing the highs and lows, inviting others to discover their strength through vulnerability, as she had. After years of being on the sidelines, Lucy had finally seized her moment, transformed her relationship with music and self-expression, and consequently, the lives around her. Her journey of self-discovery had only just begun, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.